Everyone talks about the Sistine Chapel, the jaw-dropping scale, the vibrant frescoes, the sheer impossible genius of Michelangelo. They talk about the history, the popes, the tourists, the hushed reverence. But no one, and I mean no one, talks about what else walks its hallowed halls after dark. Or rather, who? My name's Elias, and for a few months, the Sistine Chapel was my office. Not the main tourist area, mind you, but the behind-the-scenes, late-night, early-morning quiet. I was an art history intern, privileged enough to assist with minor conservation planning. This meant access to the chapel during off hours, a ghost-like existence amongst monumental art, prepping for the next day's crowds, or helping catalog subtle changes to the frescoes. It was a dream, a true honor, until it became something else entirely. The first few weeks were pure awe. Imagine standing alone beneath the creation of Adam, the Last Judgment, the prophets and sibyls, all stretching above you like a vibrant, impossible sky. The silence was profound, broken only by the distant hum of ventilation or the creak of ancient wood somewhere deep within the Vatican. It felt like being inside a living, breathing masterpiece, a place where time itself bent and warped. I'd spend hours, flashlight in hand, moving slowly, studying the brushstrokes, the subtle imperfections, the sheer ambition of it all. I felt connected to the past, to the hands that had brought this wonder into being. Then the whispers started. Not actual, clear whispers, not at first. More like a resonance, a low thrumming just at the edge of hearing, like a faraway conversation in a language I didn't understand, or the wind sighing through an old stone building. I dismissed it as fatigue. Long hours, jet lag, the echo chamber effect of the chapel's vast interior. Sound played tricks in there, bouncing off painted plaster and marble. My mind was probably just filling in the blanks, trying to make sense of the profound silence. But it wasn't just the sound. There was a chill. Not a draft, but a specific, localized cold spot that seemed to follow me. I'd be meticulously examining a section of the Genesis narrative on the ceiling, head craned back, completely absorbed, and then a distinct pocket of icy air would wash over my neck, making the hairs stand on end. I'd whip around, expecting a security guard, another curator, anyone. But there was never anyone there. Just the towering walls, the empty benches, and the overwhelming silence that now felt less profound and more expectant. The first time I saw him, it was a blur. I was packing up my gear. The chapel lights dimmed to a soft, ambient glow. My eyes, accustomed to the dimness, caught a flicker of movement far down the length of the chapel, near the altar. A tall, dark shape, too indistinct to make out details, but definitely human-like. My heart hammered. Security protocol dictated strict schedules for staff. Who else could be here? I called out, my voice swallowed by the vast space. Hello? Is anyone there? Silence. I waited, straining my eyes, but the shape was gone, melded back into the deep shadows that clung to the chapel's lower reaches. I told myself it was my imagination, a trick of the light, perhaps a custodian I hadn't seen enter. But the unsettling chill lingered, and I found myself hurrying out, locking the heavy doors behind me with a little more haste than usual. Over the next few weeks, the incidents escalated. The murmurs grew more defined, though still unintelligible. They sounded like a low, guttural murmur, a man's voice, almost like someone talking to themselves in intense concentration. Sometimes it felt like the sound was coming from within the walls, vibrating through the very stone. I started taking mental notes of where I heard them most clearly, always near the central spine of the ceiling, around the creation of Adam, the separation of light from darkness, those monumental scenes. The shadowy figure also began to manifest more clearly. It was always tall, always cloaked, or at least appeared to be, the darkness of its form seeming to absorb the little ambient light. I never saw its face. It was always turned away, or obscured by shadow, or simply faceless. Most unsettling was its posture. It wasn't wandering aimlessly. It was always standing, head tilted back, or slowly pacing, as if meticulously inspecting every inch of the ceiling. Sometimes I'd swear I saw its arm raise a subtle gesture, as if pointing to a detail or tracing an invisible line on the vaulted ceiling high above. One evening, I was alone again, the moon casting long, spectral shadows through the high windows. I was documenting some minor plaster degradation near one of the ignudi figures, my attention entirely focused on the intricate curves of its musculature. Then the distinct, sharp tap 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 of something hitting stone echoed from the far end of the chapel. It wasn't the rhythmic tapping of a leaky faucet, but a regular, purposeful. My head snapped up. There it was, standing perfectly still, silhouetted against the Last Judgment fresco, was the cloaked figure. This time it was unmistakably solid, though still devoid of specific features. Its back was to me, its head tilted far back, staring up at the ceiling. And in its hand, a long, thin object, like a rod or a very slender stick, was tapping gently against the wall, tracing something I couldn't see from my distance. The tapping was followed by a faint, exasperated sigh, almost a growl. It was a sound of profound frustration, of intense focus mixed with irritation. My heart was in my throat, hammering against my ribs. My initial skepticism had evaporated, replaced by a cold dread that seeped into my bones. This wasn't fatigue. This wasn't imagination. This wasn't a living person. The way it stood, the way it moved, or rather didn't move, the way it seemed to absorb the light, it was unnatural. I felt a primal instinct to run, but my feet were rooted to the spot, my eyes glued to the impossible sight. The figure tapped a few more times, the sound incredibly sharp in the oppressive silence, then lowered its arm. It remained motionless for a long moment, simply standing there watching. Watching what? The frescoes? Or was it watching me? A wave of intense cold washed over me, far stronger than anything before, and I felt a prickling sensation on my skin, as if countless unseen eyes were suddenly scrutinizing me. I tore my gaze away, fumbled for my equipment, and practically stumbled out of the chapel. I didn't even bother to properly lock up, just slammed the heavy doors shut and fled down the long, echoing corridors of the Vatican, not stopping until I was outside, gasping for breath in the cool Roman night air. I tried to rationalize it. I told myself I was overtired, stressed, imagining things. But every time I entered the chapel after that, the air felt heavy, charged. The whispers were no longer just indistinct murmurs. I could hear a distinct language, though I couldn't grasp the words. It was Italian, I was sure of it, but ancient, almost archaic, mixed with something else, something guttural and resonant. And the figure, it was always there. I started seeing it almost every night, just on the periphery of my vision, always near the ceiling. It never approached me directly, but it didn't need to. Its presence was enough. I felt like an intruder, an unwelcome guest in a space that belonged solely to this spectral sentinel. The way it moved, so slowly, so deliberately, head always tilted back, scanning every inch of its eternal canvas. It was like watching a ghost trapped in an endless, obsessive loop. The shift happened when the murmurs became more pointed. I was using a specialized UV light to check for microscopic cracks in the plaster near the creation of Adam, an area where the figure often appeared. The chapel was utterly still. And then, from directly above me, a low rasping sound, like dry leaves scraping against stone, and a distinct drawn-out word in ancient Italian. Defetto. Defect. My blood ran cold. Defetto. A defect. I was examining a tiny hairline crack, barely visible to the naked eye, a flaw that only a conservationist or perhaps the original artist himself would obsess over. How could a phantom know what I was looking at? How could it comment on it? I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the gloom. The figure was there, not 10 feet from me, closer than it had ever been. It was still tall, still cloaked, but now I could discern something like folds of heavy fabric. Its head was craned back as always, but I felt the immense weight of its gaze on me, even without seeing eyes. The air around it was impossibly cold, and a faint, acrid smell, like old plaster dust mixed with something metallic and sweet, filled my nostrils. Then, the murmurs became a low, continuous rumble, a stream of Italian. I didn't understand most of it, but certain words pierced through. Clear as a bell, mil capolavoro imperfetto, non ancora. My masterpiece, imperfect, not yet. It was a possessive voice, a voice consumed by its creation. It was Michelangelo, forever bound to his art, eternally inspecting, eternally unsatisfied. A chilling realization struck me. He wasn't just observing it. He was tending to it, like a gardener to his impossibly vast, eternally blooming garden. He was there to ensure its perfection, to lament its flaws, and perhaps to resent anyone else who dared to touch it, even with the intention of preserving it. My breath hitched. The figure slowly, almost imperceptibly, turned its head. Just a slight shift, but it was enough to suggest it was now looking at me. The oppressive cold intensified, and the murmurs ceased, replaced by an absolute, profound silence that was more terrifying than any sound. It was the silence of a predator assessing its prey, or a master observing an interloper. I didn't wait. I dropped my equipment, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs, and bolted. I ran from the Sistine Chapel that night faster than I had ever run in my life, the chilling silence and the lingering cold clinging to me like a shroud. I never went back in during the off hours. My internship ended shortly after. I made up some excuse about family matters. Now, whenever I see images of the Sistine Chapel, that overwhelming sense of awe is always tinged with a deep existential dread. I know what walks those floors after the crowds are gone. I know who still watches over his imperiled masterpiece. And I know that somewhere in that vast hallowed space, the great artist Michelangelo is still there, inspecting every line, every brushstroke, perhaps murmuring criticisms to himself in the eternal darkness, his spirit forever bound to the magnificent, terrifying beauty he created. If you've ever had an experience like this, or felt an inexplicable presence in a place steeped in history, let me know in the comments below. I'd be fascinated and terrified to hear your stories.